about. Well, one simple example comparing the United States and Britain. Britain has about twice the burglary rate that we have here in the United States. But not only that, but almost 60% of the time that burglary occurs in Britain, it occurs while the residents are in the dwelling.
Jeez.
In the United States, it's about 13%.
So they don't even care because they know that the Brit doesn't have a gun.
That's exactly right. When they do surveys of burglars in the United States who are in jail, and they ask them, how long do you spend casing a house before you break in? American burglars report that they spend about twice as long as their British counterparts. And when they are asked why, they give the exact reason that you just gave, and that is they're worried about getting shot. That's not a concern that their British counterparts have.
Well, that's because they know that, the chances are pretty high that that person in Great Britain will not have a gun. He might have a knife, but he won't have a gun. But right. the person who breaks into the house probably has the gun.
Yeah. Even in the United States where we've seen laws passed that go and require that people have to lock up their guns, you see two things that happen. You see that criminals become more emboldened to attack people in their homes when they're there. They don't spend as much time casing a house as they did previously. And they're more successful in harming the people in the home than they were previously. So we don't have the British disease in the sense anywhere nearly as bad as the British do, but you can see when states try to pass these types of gun laws, which is something that's high on President Obama's agenda to try to pass, you see that criminals respond there. They are more likely to commit crimes and people are more likely to get harmed.
Are you one of the few economists out there that stick your neck out in support of guns?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I can't tell you how many friends of mine in academia that have just told me that, they might have done some research on this area, but, they just see kind of what one has to put up with in terms of, just not just academia generally. But, academia is a fairly liberal place, and, it just creates an interesting life for some of the things you have to do. I could give you stories. When I was at University of Chicago, for example, I had Mayor Daley call up the president of Hugo Sonnenschein, president of the University of Chicago, and basically go through a whole list of things that the city wanted to do with the school and the projects that they wanted to work on and the great future that they could have. And then he said that my continued presence at the University of Chicago was going to do, quote, irreparable damage to the relationship between the city and the school there. And, needless to say, I was gone at the end of that school year. And, and when I was at Yale, I had a couple of U.S. senators and a state attorney general call up and complain to the dean about me. And, in Daley's case, obviously he was leading the suits against the gun makers that were there. And, he was upset by opinion pieces that I had written criticizing the lawsuits in both the Chicago Tribune and the Wall Street Journal. And, you run into those types of things. I think if I had been on the liberal side of those types of issues, I don't think administrators at different schools would have put up with that. I think they would have said, this is academic freedom of speech, and they would have, those are the types of things that happen.
I have heard that police departments are concerned that they, too, could run out of ammo. Some of them are stockpiling.
Right. Well, they have budget issues that are there. They only have so much money to spend on different things. And if the price of ammunition goes up, they may do less target practice shooting than they would have done otherwise, which has its own costs and issues involved. But, they only have so much money. You either have fewer police or you have fewer staff or you have to go and buy less ammunition.
Well, where does it all end then, John? What's going to happen? Look into your crystal ball, 3, 4, 5 years out.
Well, there are lots of things that the Obama administration can do beyond just new laws that are get passed. And, And I think you see this not only in the debate, claims about facts that we've already talked about, but they go and try to demonize gun owners and try to help push in many different ways for gun control. But that's just the beginning of what I think is going to happen. I think you look what happened during the Clinton administration. They were coming out with a new quote-unquote study every 6 months about the benefits of the Brady Act or the assault weapons ban. And essentially what they would do is they'd say, look, the assault weapons ban went into effect in 94. Violent crime has fallen since 94. Therefore, the assault weapons ban is responsible for the drop. It was nothing more than a 3 or 4 page press release, maybe sometimes 6 pages. It wasn't really what you would call a study, but the New York Times and USA Today would have front page stories on it saying new government study claims that crime has fallen. Of course, crime had been falling from 91. And of course, even the academic studies that the Clinton administration funded, there's not one single refereed academic study that's found that either the assault weapons ban or the Brady Act have reduced any type of violent crime rate. And yet, those studies kept on coming out, from kind of the political people or the non-academic types at the Justice Department. And I assume we're going to be seeing the same things here. It always kind of amazes me how when Republicans are there, they really don't care about research that's done. In fact, when Bush took over, the person who was the head of the Bureau of Justice Statistics and the person who was head of the National Institute of Justice were both Democrats. And the person who was head of the Bureau of Justice Statistics had been deputy director under the Clinton administration. And they just didn't seem to care about having what I would regard as higher quality research that was there. And I think Obama and Clinton both understand how research and at least the media coverage of that later on affects the debate. And I think you're going to run into more of that too. And I think it may not be now in the next couple of years, but I think you're going to see, the assault weapons ban. You're going to see pushes for registration. Pelosi, as I mentioned just a couple of weeks ago, was pushing for registration of guns in the United States. The claim is that if you register guns, it can help solve crime. And the notion is that if a gun is left at a crime scene and it's registered to the person who committed the crime, you can go and trace it back. The problem is, one, guns are very rarely left at the crime scene. When they are left at the crime scene, it's because either the criminal's been either seriously injured or killed,
right?
So you're going to catch them anyway. And when they are left at the crime scene, they're virtually never registered. And when they are registered, the few times they're not registered to the person who committed the crime. And so you look at Canada, for example, they've had licensing and registration of handguns since the 1930s. Just a couple of years ago, the government came out and noted that there's only 3 crimes that had been committed with handguns that registration had helped solve. And even in 2 of those 3 cases, it was debatable. You look at Hawaii, which has had registration of guns for 50 years. A couple of years ago, the Honolulu police noted that they could not identify one single crime that they'd been able to solve as a result of registration. And, that's real money. I mean, we were talking a minute ago about, the problems with police not having enough money maybe to go and buy ammunition. They're being forced in many of these places to waste valuable police resources on these laws that may have something for politicians to make hay of, but are just a waste of money. And the long gun registration that they've had in Canada now, they spent something like $2 billion Canadian dollars on it. They could go and hire 30,000 police
instantly. Let's take some phone calls when we come back. John Lott.